WHAS in the morning team. Happy to have, as always, the CEO and Commander-in-Chief of Trends Research, and another trend alert coming out, Gerald Celente, the Director of the Trends Research Institute. Hey, Gerald.
Good morning, Tony.
I appreciate you joining us, as always. Long time no hear from, but pretty much everything you said was going to happen happened. So, congratulations again here. I guess we'll start out there. Let me ask you a question. Tomorrow, of course, we've got a huge election, not only here in Kentucky, but throughout this country. Who do you think is going to win?
Well, in Kentucky, you're really leading the pack with Rand Paul, and that's where a lot of the country is moving toward. Excuse me, a libertarian movement, and a move really to a breakup of the two-headed one-party system. People are really looking for the change that they're not going to get from keeping the same political mafia in place, the Democrats and the Republicans, the Gambinos, the Gallos, Greenberg, Iceberg. It's all the same. And people are really looking for something that's very different. Now, unfortunately, they're only going to get a little taste of it. If the Republicans, which are expected to come in, win handily, it really won't make any difference at all in the major scene. Oh, yeah, they'll talk about health care and some tax issues, but by and large, it's more of the same. Go back to 2006. Remember when the Democrats threw out the Republicans? They wanted to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Democrats swept in, and here we are, still in Iraq and still in Afghanistan.
Well, what I'm discovering is that no one party actually fulfills everybody's needs. You have some people who are socially conservative but fiscally more progressive, as the term is like to be used, and vice versa. And it occurs to me that I think you're right. It almost feels like we have a parliamentary populace here in the United States, but only a two-party system. How are we going to work all that out?
Well, it has to change. We need a third party, and it's very hard to happen because of the regulations put in place by the parties to prevent new entrants, and particularly now with this type of campaign contributions that are unlimited, could come from any source without documenting them, and that makes it more difficult yet. And by the way, this whole theory, this whole language, calling them campaign contributions. Mm-hmm. Let's grow up about this. Let's call them bribes and payoffs. It's a lot of baloney. They're not contributions. You're buying your way into power. So it really has to change at a fundamental level. And for adults to believe politicians, they better grow up. How many years do they have to go through in life before they know that most of what politicians tell them is it turns out to be lies? And when you ask them a question, it's like playing a tape recorder. They have their pat answer to a question that has nothing to do relative to the question that you asked. So expecting a politician to tell the truth is like a John expecting a prostitute not to ask for money.
Well, even in our own election here for the United States Senate, take Rand Paul, for example, and Jack Conway. We had 3 debates. All of them, really not a lot was answered by either one of them. And it really comes down to 2 fundamental things, I think. How much should government be involved in making decisions for this country, and the money spent in this country by government programs, and how much shouldn't? And what's ironic is I think both of them kind of backed off. I don't think Rand Paul was very forthcoming with the fact that, not that he's anti-government, but he's certainly anti-spending, and probably wouldn't have a lot of the entitlement programs that are involved here. And I don't think Conway, his message was going to resonate with the people here in Kentucky either, because if everybody knew how much he believed in government's solution to problems, there's no way he can be voted for. Probably.
Well, you hit it on the head. These people don't have the answers. It's a lot of blah, 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 and posturing. There is no doubt that line that politics is show business for ugly people could not be more apparent. This is one reality show, and a real bad one at that. And it's nationwide. Again, and I say this, by the way, from experience. I began my career many years ago at a graduate school running elections in Westchester County in New York. And then from there they sent me up to Albany. And I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. It was the worst job I ever had in my life. To watch grown men lie, suck up, and grovel all day long is nothing that any respectable human being would be a part of. And that's what the whole political system is. I'm looking at these numbers, Barney Frank in Massachusetts. They're worrying about he's been there for 15 terms.
Wow.
When are these guys going to get a job? They never get their fingernails dirty, and they have serfs and slaves waiting on them all day long. I see a picture of Hillary Clinton in Drudge Report last week, and she's waving from the top of her jumbo jet with this big seal, Secretary of State. Who made this stuff up? Anyway, the big seal, this big jumbo jet, here's my plane. Who's paying for this nonsense?
I thought we were supposed to settle that back in 1776.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, we'll be back with more from Gerald Celente. When we return, the European economy is going in the tank. European workers are going on strike. How come the United States doesn't get it? That's what's coming up next here with Gerald Celente on 84 WHAS.
Rush Limbaugh.
Find a way to get the half my brain I'm not using into your hands, for example, and up the intelligence level.
Weekdays, noon to 3 on 84 WHAS.
Back with Gerald Celente joining us. Gerald, I'll start with where I ended. I mean, you look at Europe right now. France, you've got workers striking. You've got people upset that they're going to have to maybe work a couple of more years rather than stay out of work when they're 62 for their own form of Social Security. In Italy, you've got trash collectors who are striking as well. What do you make of all of this? And it looks like the United States is headed more that direction. It's like we're taking on more of a European model of government.
Well, you have the Trends Journal, the autumn edition, and the headline is Off with Their Heads 2.0. And what's going on in Europe is, and by the way, the story about France, that's only part of the story, the 62-year-old partial retirement. They raised the full retirement from 65 to 67, and that's part of that's not making the U.S. news. And also, the French put a lot of money into their retirement programs, so it's not like they're getting it for free. And these are the people that know the deal, and these are the ones that invented the guillotine. And the fact is that they don't mind the rich taking their slice of the pie. But when they take all of it and leave them with not a lot, they get very angry. And the same thing's happening all over the world. You look at the U.S. We went from the most egalitarian nation on earth, one way you used to brag about the middle class, where now the gap between the rich and the poor is the widest in the U.S. of any of the industrialized nations.
How did that happen? Because Democrats blame the rich for keeping it all to themselves. Republicans blame taxation from keeping the rich from hiring people. Where's the middle, or maybe there is no middle ground? Maybe it's neither.
Oh, it's right in front of us. It's these disgusting politicians that sold out America so they could retain their power and office positions. And let's start with Bill Clinton, with NAFTA. NAFTA was a total failure. It sold this country out by taking down trade barriers, moving at first our manufacturing to communist countries like China, where they have slave labor, and then bring the product back home and mark it up so they can make more money.
I thought Democrats fought slave labor.
Yeah, you got it.
By the way, Republican Congress that committed that as well.
That's exactly. Oh, they're all complicit. They're all complicit. I could go down the line. I'm just beginning with Clinton, and we could keep running through. Right. And then you look now, Tony. First they sold the manufacturing, and then they sold our brains, because the Chinese aren't stupid. They said, yeah, you can open up these plants, but we want your technology. And voila, now we have China with the fastest computer on earth. So first they took our manufacturing, then they grabbed our brain power. So you want to see what happened to the country, that's part of it. And then the other part, here's where the Republicans come in, it was the dismantling of laws that were put in place that at the turn of the last century, the 1900s to 20th century, 19th to 20th century, they had laws in place like the Sherman Antitrust Act,
right,
the Robertson-Patman Act,
good point,
to prevent these greedy pigs from taking all of the action. And now what happened? We became a Walmart world. In the old days, Tony, when I went to college back in the 60s, I remember the first thing I was learning about. You know, if you had a lot of money, you couldn't buy on, just because you were buying a lot of product, you didn't get a big break on it. You were treated like everybody else. Okay, we'll give you some breaks on the shipping because you're buying more of it. So now what they've done is they've tilted the playing field. And then you have these people that call them economic development agencies. And I know that business. I have my master's in it, and I began my career with it. What a baloney line this one is. Let's give the tax breaks to all the big corporations, loan guarantees, infrastructure repairs, while we squeeze the little people, while we drain the money from the working class to provide it to these people so they could, quote, create jobs. So you know what they do, Tony? They create big bonuses for themselves, and they squeeze out the competition. That's what happened to America. America's been sold out by the Republicans and the Democrats. Let's call a spade a spade.
Let me ask you this final question, Gerald Celente, and I've got to go pretty quick, but some would say, particularly politicians would say, look, Gerald, this is the world today. It's a one-world economy. You're an economic isolationist. We can't have that anymore.
I would say to them, they don't know what they're talking about. They sold the country out. Let's go back to when it worked before. Put Glass-Steagall back in place that prevented these bankster criminals from robbing us blind. Put Sherman Antitrust back in place and Robertson-Patman that these slimy politicians took away from the people so they could put all the money in the pockets of the rich.
You can find out more from Gerald Celente at trendsresearch.com. Gerald, appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you, Tony.